This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Rated T to M. Hey, want to hear a PC Game Pass ad? I'll take your silence as a yes. Want new games on day one like Call of Duty Black Ops 6 or Stalker 2? I thought so. How about unlocking all the League of Legends champions when you link your Riot Games account? All for one low monthly price? Well, guess what? We got you. Learn more at xbox.com/PC Game Pass or click the banner. Stalker 2 available November 20th, 2024. Game catalog varies by region and over time. And that's the end of the script.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. Donald Trump's loyalists are engaged in wild new contortions to defend his manifestly unfit nominees. On Thursday, Senator Tommy Tuberville actually said Trump is a better judge of his choices than the Senate is. Never mind the upper chamber's advice and consent role. Two other GOP senators are dismissing allegations about Trump's choice for defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, because they come from anonymous sources. But Hegseth entered into a non-disclosure agreement to secure one accuser's silence. This stuff just isn't working. Hegseth still hangs in the balance, his fate uncertain. What's going wrong for Trump here? Salon's Amanda Marcotte has a new piece offering a simple explanation. Trump wants to elevate people who heinously abuse women to empower misogyny, and it's so egregious that it's backfiring on him. Is it possible Trump can't do whatever the hell he wants? Are there limits after all? We're talking to Amanda Marcotte about all this right now. Thanks for coming on, Amanda.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with this Tommy Tuberville thing because it's so crazy. Listen to this.
Who are we to say that we're a better vetter and picker of people than Donald Trump?
Isn't that you're advising consent? That's your job.
Advising consent, but that's more the Democrats. Donald Trump did all the vetting they needed to do on Pete Hegseth, and I just can't believe we even have people on our side that are saying, well, I've got to look at this, got to look at that. What they're doing is they're throwing rocks at Donald Trump. They're not throwing them at Pete Hegseth. They're throwing them at Donald Trump because they're saying, well, we don't believe you did the right vetting and we don't believe he can do the job. Wait a minute. That's not our job to do that.
Amanda, I think Tommy Tuberville accidentally said the quiet part out loud there. GOP senators are supposed to go through the motions of vetting Trump's picks and then put through whichever ones they can get away with, even if they're totally unfit. But Tuberville says straight out that they should just rubber stamp all of them with no oversight at all. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting to me how many of these people are revealing that they just really want a king. They want to believe that a king has been granted to them by God, and they think that would just be a lot easier than all this thinking and vetting and work. Like, he was supposed to be a good football coach, but I don't know. Like, he obviously prefers a job that's ceremonial and has no real responsibility.
And, I got to think other senators see that and they're just like, Tommy, come on, man. You're not supposed to tell people how it works.
Some of them, I think, there's still a couple holdouts who I think actually kind of do wish that they could exert more power over these picks and are looking for their spots.
Yeah, no question. I think, in fairness, a number of Republican senators are actually trying to show at least a little spine, right? A bunch of them kind of brought down Matt Gaetz, who was also completely unfit for the job of Attorney General. And it looks as if some senators objected and kind of got the Trump team to agree to some kind of FBI background checks. But here we are. Pete Hegseth's fate is still uncertain. after allegations of public drunkenness, of serial infidelities against his first wife, and even his own mother, who said he abused women regularly but then took it back. And Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, who seems to be another one who wants to play some kind of role here, is still withholding her support. Axios reports that Trump isn't working the phones for Hegseth, which surprised me. Where do you think things really stand for Hegseth right now?
I'm cautiously optimistic that he's going to go down, and they're just trying to give Trump a face-saving method of pulling the nomination or having Hegseth pull out rather than actually take it to the mat. And they're smart to do so because that would be a better way for them. And obviously Trump, he can be manipulated in this way because he wants to save face as well. And, honestly, though, I think the other part of this that we need to think about is Republicans live in this country too. You don't want somebody at the head of the largest military in the world who can't even show up to work without being drunk on the job at a Fox News show.
And that brings me to your piece, which is kind of grappling with why it is that Trump is picking these people who are so flagrantly, ridiculously unmatched for this kind of job, right? And you write that Trump is very deliberately trying to assemble what you call an anti-Me Too cabinet, meaning his choices are expressly designed to honor his tacit promise to his bro supporters to empower misogyny. Matt Gaetz, as we talked about, allegations of sexual trafficking. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Trump's pick for HHS, allegedly committed sexual assault in the 1990s. Now all the Hegseth stuff. You argue that this appeals to Trump in some kind of, lizard brain way. It normalizes his behavior. Can you talk about that big picture a bit?
The left is always accused of doing quote unquote identity politics when they try to address inequalities and certain people being left behind and trying to find ways to get more equality. This is kind of actual identity politics that Trump is playing because he can't actually do the things that he kind of implied he could to his bro supporters, which is to somehow roll back women's independence, somehow make women be your girlfriend and make you a sandwich, somehow get women to shut up, right? Those are the things they want. They can't get those things. He can't actually do those things. So instead, Trump is substituting this completely empty identity politics where they get a lot of misogynists get a lot of symbolic representation. Okay, well, we can't make your girlfriend come back to you because you wouldn't do the dishes, but we can put a bunch of sex abusers in high office and you can look at them and I guess feel good about yourself. I don't know. It's supposed to demoralize feminists and make us feel like we've lost a lot of ground. But as I argue in the piece, I think what's actually happening is that it's become a reminder of why Me Too was such an important movement to begin with. We have this MAGA movement attempt to make misogyny just seem like a fun sport, just guys being guys. It's no big deal. It doesn't mean anything. Women are hysterical. It's the woke mob. They just are oversensitive Karens. And what Me Too did was go, oh, well, actually, this is what happened to me when I dealt with this attitude in person. I was violently assaulted. I'm traumatized for life. These guys attack women over and over again, and it's not cute and it's not fun. It's scary. And it often causes women to lose their jobs. It causes women to suffer, again, great trauma. And, the impacts are huge. And that, I think, had a very sobering effect on a lot of people, which was to say, oh, yeah, there's actually a human cost to misogyny, and women pay it. And I think, again, that's burned out a little because I think we've all told those stories and it feels repetitive to keep doing it. And it's very hard, especially for survivors, to just keep talking about their trauma over and over again. It always re-traumatizes you a little. But I think what has happened with Gaetz and Hegseth, by picking these guys, and then forcing the details of what they've been accused of into the public eye, we're getting a little reminder again of why that has so much power. I mean, Matt Gaetz particularly portrays himself as a good time guy, but it's actually gross and upsetting, the details that leaked out when in those 8 days between when he was nominated and when he withdrew. 17-year-old, I mean, ugh.
With the election of Donald Trump, staying informed is more important than ever, and we're thankful you've chosen to listen to the DSR Network. Through the turbulent times ahead, we will continue to provide the insightful expert analysis on the issues that matter most around the world. We ask that you consider becoming a member to support our effort to provide you the best content possible. DSR members gain access to an ad-free listening experience, exclusive members-only segments of our shows, our members-only Discord community, and more. Use code HOLIDAY25 to get 50% off of your membership subscription at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's code HOLIDAY25 at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. The DSR Network will evolve in exciting ways in the new year, and we hope you'll join us.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because the same thing with Hegseth, right? The serial infidelities he's accused of, the abuses of women he's accused of. This stuff is fun and games for the bros for a while, but then like when the world actually sees the details, people really recoil. And I think that's sort of the core of your argument, right? That he's sort of humoring the bros and trying to essentially launder misogyny, I guess, by putting all these people in these high-profile roles, making it okay to treat women that way. I guess in his mind, that's what that looks like. But in reality, the details are making it very hard for some of these senators to get to yes. Gaetz went down, Hegseth hanging in the balance. That's the argument, right?
Yeah, and I think Hegseth also draws out another issue that we need to think about, which is that violence against women, abuse of women, is very rarely contained to just men and women, right? Usually the kinds of guys that are abusers of women, as Hegseth's mother called him, tend to have this toxic masculinity that manifests in all sorts of really negative ways. And you really see this with Hegseth. I mean, he's very, he's racist, to begin with. He has this virulent hatred of Muslims that's downright terrifying, especially, from Muslim service members, I have to imagine, facing the possibility that he would be their boss. And, he just sort of has this world, like he belongs to a Christian nationalist church, and their worldview is very domineering. They believe that the federal government exists to force their version of Christianity on not just all Americans, but the whole world. There's a tendency, there's a link between that kind of misogyny and just authoritarian, sadistic worldview in general. And also with him, the drinking, I think we need to consider that as like an aspect of this as well. It's very well known that like men who are abusive towards women often do drink a lot. And, I think in a lot of cases it's so that they can have the will to do that or suppress the guilt inside from it.
Yeah, it really paints a pretty ugly picture when you think about the possibility that these things actually appeal to Trump. I mean, it's very clear that that's the case, right? He clearly feels simpatico with these types.
Yeah, I think it is true that he feels attacked because people keep saying it's wrong to sexually assault women. I really do recommend that if you haven't seen it, watch it, or rewatch it if you have. The clips from Trump's deposition during the E. Jean Carroll trial, very, very telling. He's so defensive, so angry, and so entitled. He cannot believe. He obviously thinks it's ridiculous that anybody would say that what he did to her was wrong, that anyone cares about her, that anyone would think that that wasn't just a rich man taking what was his. And I think he genuinely believes that. I think a lot of men that kind of ape that misogyny are not as sociopathic and so maybe have more mixed feelings about it inside. But I think for Trump, like, he wants to surround himself with people that are going to reaffirm his belief that this is just what men do, especially rich men, and how dare anyone say we shouldn't.
Right. And so this is all becoming so glaringly obvious that Republican senators are having trouble doing what Tommy Tuberville said is their duty, which is to do nothing and just put them all through. But meanwhile, Trump's supporters are now engaged in these wildly contorted defenses of this right now. Lindsey Graham and Rick Scott are both arguing that the allegations against Hegseth don't count because they're based on anonymous sources. But he paid a woman who'd accused him as part of a non-disclosure agreement to be quiet. And we should add again that his own mother said he had regularly abused women. I mean, this is what I don't quite get. Why is Lindsey Graham doing that? He's supposed to be a defense hawk, right? He knows Hegseth has no business running the Pentagon. It's extremely disturbing to see someone like Lindsey Graham defend someone like Hegseth.
Yeah, and again, I would like to ask Republican senators to consider the fact that they have to live here too. Like, I really wish they think about the same thing with RFK. Like, we went through this in 2020 with the COVID pandemic. Like, these people are in positions where if something bad happens, they have to be the decider. Do you really want somebody you can't even trust to watch your 5-year-old for 10 minutes? I do think he picked Hegseth in part because Hegseth is very good looking. And he's got a very kind of like, he kind of looks like a Tom of Finland character, but that's not what the reference point that Trump would probably make. But, he looks like a movie star from the 1950s, right? There's no doubt about it. And Trump just wants to look at a guy like that all day and think that it reflects well on him because he still thinks he's very handsome. And I think that it's going to be hard to look at Hegseth and not just think about him just being just drunk and being dragged out of a Louisiana strip club.
Yeah, I got to think that sort of thing really does grate on Trump. So let's bring this back to Tuberville for a minute. What's the big picture here? What do we think the prognosis is? Are Republican senators behaving the way Tuberville says they should behave as rubber stamps or not? What do we think?
I think they desperately want to. And Trump is making it very hard for them to do that. I mean, we're still 6 weeks away from inauguration. And like, if Hegseth goes down, I think Gabbard and RFK might be next in the hopper for like being the media firestorm around them. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot more of the soft power is coming into play because Trump does need Republicans behind him. My only question is because he's gotten so old and so addled and so like all of his like personality malignancies are getting so bad that if he's possibly forgotten that you need to actually have some kind of coalition, that you can't just always rule by force and fear. And so there's always a possibility that he doesn't change course. But, in this first term, he seemed to understand that he had to do a little bit of carrot, not all stick with Republicans. And either way, I think it's kind of a good thing that they're showing a little spine because if he does decide to just go all force and fear, he's going to break apart his coalition pretty quickly. They're going to become immobile, and I don't think they're going to get much done, honestly. You just can't get people in line if you just offer them nothing but yelling at them. And so I'm a little bit, all of this is making me feel a little bit better than I did on election night is all I'll say.
Yeah, let's hear why. I mean, I need to feel optimistic. Why is that?
Because Trump hasn't learned anything. Like, he's super bad about building a coalition. He just wants to intimidate people into bending the knee. Half the reason that he's only nominating clowns to office is because no one else will work for him. And I think that all of that suggests that like he's going to come into office with a lot less competency than we've been threatened with. And I'm not saying none. Like Russ Bott, the guy who he's going to have run OMB, is a terrifying character. But, I think that if it's going to be a lot of this palace intrigue, backbiting, infighting, and clown stuff, that's going to slow them down and make it a lot harder to, make Project 2025 happen.
Yeah, and I think maybe the way to think about it also is that the more he acts like that and the more incompetent he appears to be, the less easy it is for Republican senators to be Tommy Tubervilles.
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to pass like legislation at all. I think, in fact, clearly, like the whole point of Project 2025 was this assumption that passing legislation was never going to work. So they were going to just try to turn Trump into a dictator. But I mean, easier said than done, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, Kash Patel, I got to say, he seems pretty buffoonish, even though he's scary in his own way.
Yeah, he plans. He also thinks that the only way to wield power is with a big stick. And I think that that's just not the way it is. You can threaten people with investigations, but that can only go so far if you don't actually have an entire FBI you've completely restaffed with yes men.
Well, let's end it there since it's about as optimistic as I think we're capable of being at this moment. Amanda Marcotte, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, make sure to check out some content we have up at TNR.com. Nick Tabor explaining what states should do right now to fight climate change under Trump. And over on the DSR network, make sure to listen to the latest episode of Deep State Radio featuring former FBI Assistant Director Frank Figliuzzi to discuss Trump's troubling Kash Patel pick. Also, be sure to tune into the latest episode of Words Matter, where Norm Ornstein and Kavita Patel break down the 2025 Congress, the transition process, and what the House and Senate Democrats can and should do now. We'll see you all next week. You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler on the DSR Network.